That is spring water gushing out of the South Downs. Very clean and very natural. Hello, I'm Richard Vobes and I'm the Bald Explorer, and if you're watching this is the fourth and final part of a walk that I'm doing from Hangleton to Edburton, or Edburton, not quite sure how it's pronounced, in the footsteps of Arthur Stanley Cooke, who wrote a remarkable book called Off the Beaten Track. And this stage goes through Fulking, which I have just walked through, and I'm heading along this downland road which is skirting along the north face of the South Downs towards Edburton. So Fulking is a very, very pretty village with lots of history and interesting points, but I've made a video about Fulking and I don't want to repeat myself, so I'll put a link to the YouTube video in the description so you can check that out. So I'm going to carry on to pastures new, as it were, further along the road. Wow, you do get an amazing view along here. Now I'm starting this early in the morning so that the sun is still coming down from the east southwards, and this is really the only time of day when the north face is going to get lit by sunlight, because obviously the sun is going down on the south, and you just get an amazing perspective of these beautiful chalky downland hills covered in their wonderful grass, which have been grazed by sheep over millennium, and on the other side in various parts farmed by primitive man, Saxons and so on, Iron Age hill fort. Just an amazing stretch of hills, and it's getting hot. Well, Arthur mentions a few interesting things about Fulking, the big timber framed house and what have you, and of course the stream which we saw at the beginning, and then he makes his way westwards along this road, which is now tarmacked and probably was just a dusty lane back 100 years ago, and he pretty much gets to Edburton, and he misses out something which I think is absolutely fascinating just west of Fulking. So I want to take you there and have a look at that, but please don't get too excited, there's not that much to see. So Edburton is about a mile between Fulking that way and this way, and the village is just up here really, but there's lots of interesting things both sides of this escarpment, and that's what we're going to have a look at. Well, I said there's not much to see, and I'm looking northwards at an empty field with a slight rise in it, a bit of a hill or hillock. Now 300 yards from the last farmhouse in Fulking, looking west in this field here, from what my little bit of research tells me, is there used to be a manor house here, and we're talking going back to the 13th century, the Perching Manor House, or the Castle of Perching, because it had permission in the 13th century, something like 1264 or something, to crenellate a masonry building, and it was here. But there's nothing to see now and I believe that if you're allowed in the field, you could probably more or less work out the footprint. It was a moated property, so there was a moat around the manor. And in Arthur Stanley Cooke's time, 100 years ago, there may well have been some bits of ruins, because in the 50s, in the book that I was reading about this, it said there were people who had, in living memory, they knew the masonry remains were there. So it is possible that Arthur, walking along here, could have glanced at that, maybe not knowing what it was. Well, there are more interesting things across the road to have a look at. So, I think this is Perching Hill, this one here right in front of me, and I'm guessing it gets its name from the defunct manor house. And it's interesting because on the top of Perching Hill is a barn. It's marked on the maps, it's marked on older maps as well, Perching Hill Barn. And apparently, and this might sound odd, but there's a well there, or the remnants of a well, which would provide drinking water, presumably quite a deep well, but it must hit some form of little aquifer or what have you in the hill, where water is, there's enough water to feed a community or provide water for a community. Anyway, the point being is that there was a medieval settlement on the top, not Iron Age, not Neolithic, but a medieval settlement. Now, whether that grew up from earlier times, I can't tell you, but it was there until, I believe, and somebody will correct me, I'm sure, until about 1530 or something. Now, whether that was shepherds and farmers or something, just a remote little community up there, whether it was an outlier of the manor house doing work for the manor down here, which I would imagine is more likely, seeing as the manor house was around, well, it rebuilt the crenellations in 1316, I think it was. So the chances are they were at the same time, but of course all of that's gone, and all of that has now gone. Now you can climb to the top of the hill on many of these wonderful paths which take you all the way up. And if you go right to almost to the other end, the southern end, if you like, of the South Downs, you're effectively getting to the end of this parish. And there were 2 Iron Age settlements up there, and what's even more interesting is a Roman cemetery was just discovered in about 1805, right on the far side. But there's also another thing a little further along which I want to tell you about. So we've got to go back to the road. Here we go. I think this is the place. So we've just moved on not too far along where we were, and on this ridge here is Edburton Hill. I think it's this one just to the right of the little trees at the top there. Now, Edburton Hill has some earthworks on it, and you can clearly see them on satellite pictures, and when and if I eventually get my drone operating, I will perhaps go up there and take some drone footage. I haven't got that at the moment, but up the top there, Edburton Castle. Timber frame castle from the Norman period, probably quite early after 1066, as the Normans were beginning to stamp their authority and show that they were the new governors of England. And up they came and erected these things. It would have been spotted on the landscape, as you can imagine, for miles around. And if I've got this right, and this may be slightly out, I think this castle lies on a division, on the division between the Rape of Bramber and the Rape of Lewes. And when the Normans came in, they divided Sussex into 5 and then I think 6 strips of land, great swathes, which were known as rapes. So you've got the Rape of Bramber, which was run by the new lord there, William de Warenne, and then you've got the Rape of Lewes on that side. And I think this is on the boundary of that. Now, whether that was to collect taxes or not, as people were walking on the South Downs Way, not that it was called the South Downs Way, but the ancient trackway that ran on the top, and the castle would be, from our position now, it's about 100 or 200 yards just north of that, but it's on the top there. Now, I've made a video about this, and I'll put the link in the description so you can check out Edburton Castle. But we're now very close to Edburton itself. There's not a huge amount there, but let's go and check it out. Here we are, Edburton Church. Beautiful flint and rubble church, 12th century, and my destination arrived, and also Arthur's destination on this walk. That's fantastic. So, what does Arthur say about Edburton Church? Let's have a little look. I've got it marked here on page 60. He says, this is quite interesting, and obviously we can't, unfortunately, due to the coronavirus, still can't go into churches at the moment, but he says it's large and full of interest for the antiquarian, which is rather good. He says it possesses one of the only 3 cast lead fonts in our county, perhaps the oldest of them. And he also tells us that one of the bells is amongst the oldest in Sussex and bears 2 shields and an octagonal medallion. Well, unfortunately, can't go and see that, but it's a beautiful church in a beautiful setting. And behind me, the wonderful South Downs. Well, we are tucked away in the absolute middle of nowhere, really, here, right up against the face of the Downs, the northern slopes, and it's fantastic. What a place, and what an amazing walk. Well done, Arthur Stanley Cooke, for selecting it. Well, that's the end of this walk, but Arthur has, as you can imagine, in a thick tome like this, plenty more to go and have a look at. So we'll be back again to follow in the footsteps of Arthur Stanley Cooke in Off the Beaten Track in Sussex, in my search for Sussex on the quest for England. So thank you so much for watching. If you've enjoyed this series, why not give me a thumbs up? Tell your friends about it, post it on social media, that would be great. And you can become a patron and all the usual stuff. But anyway, I will be out and about, and I'll see you again next time. Thanks so much for watching. Bye-bye.